Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me today. I've got a lot to talk about. We're going to be talking about hospitals and snakes and all kinds of things. Before I get started, China really is coming open with these dams releasing because here's the wording that they're using in China. It says something like China dam releases, unleashing destruction to prevent disaster. See how that wording goes, to prevent disaster. So what they're saying is, "Oh, aren't you lucky? We released those dams and flooded you all out, but hey, the dam is still in place." So that's how that wording is going. And just this week, after they got rid of they're getting rid of the stuff for the poor people, Medicaid and food and things like that. Well, Trump just gave private equity the 401k savings. So that means that I guess they got the poor people on one end of the stick and the white workers are coming next. They're coming for your 401k savings. And that private equity, I'll have to get back with that. Interesting story about private equity, but not for today. And in the news about Epstein, it's getting interesting. Tucker Carlson is now the misdirection king. He's saying, well, everybody has a right to know what's going on. I think this is from Israel. Well, Israel is an outpost of the United States. It is not plotting this Epstein deal. It's in on the plot, but to say that it is Israel doing it all would be what I would call a misdirection, right? Because the U.S. has Israel there, Israel, as their outpost. Because today we're going to be talking more about the Jews, the Jesuits, and Jesus. They have this thing going on with Jesus that I want to talk about, and also these snakes. They have two snakes on their medical logos, but one snake was added later on. Wonder why that was. The added snake is the vicious snake, and that snake got added around 1906 by the U.S. Army. Gee, why would they add a vicious snake to their logo? Like I said, it's all in those logos, right? And there's also this theory about purple. I keep hearing people say, oh, purple, that's a royal color. But they never say why. I used to hear them say things like, well, purple because purple was such a hard color to make. That's why they had to have purple. Well, I don't know if that is true or not because it always stuck in my mind that it can't be true, right? Because purple is basically just mixing blue and red together and you get purple, right? So why all this talk about how hard it is to make purple? Well, I don't really know, but it seems to me like it isn't true because purple comes out of two base colors. And isn't it interesting? Those two colors, blue and red, are also on all of the flags, right? Blue and red. So today, popes are wearing purple robes. But there was a time in history that they claim that Jesus was mocked by wearing a purple robe. So we got a lot going on. We got these people wearing white coats and their snake logos. We got priests running around wearing purple robes. They supposedly mocked Jesus with a purple robe. What is with all of this purple stuff? And at the end of the show, I have some information about Israel Zeus, the researcher who has come up with all of the data on these people. I found a new group of information from him, a very interesting group about the mafia focused around Trump. So I'll go over that at the very end. So we'll be talking a little bit about hospital safety today. And how did a Franklin case person end up dead in a hospital? Well, that's an interesting story. So the language will also give us a timeline to when these people took over, but I don't know if I will have time to get to the language part today. If I get there, I get there. If not, I'll come back to it later. But first, let's get going on this Jesus business. Jesus, according to the Catholics and the Protestants, is the Son of God and the Savior. Jesus is also, according to them, central to salvation. Pretty big deal, right? Give all your sins over to Jesus. Jesus will help you out. And also, the Eastern Orthodox people are into Jesus, also central to salvation. But we have these other groups. We have the Islam groups, Hinduism, and those groups, and they're not into Jesus so much. But what I'll be talking about is this relationship with Jesus because here's what I think is going on. The New World Order, because we are the old world, right? So, of course, New World Order is what they plan coming in the future. Well, the New World Order will likely include a place without borders. one religion, and I believe they're gearing up for that one religion to become Catholics right there in the Vatican. Because we have all these Christian groups who have all become Zionists. So this is all going to matter in the near future. So that's where I think this is all going. And it's always about these omissions, right? Because what they say is in a lot of these legal cases, just to wrap up this Epstein case, the reason they really couldn't get, excuse me, not Epstein, Diddy, too many rapists. The reason they couldn't get charges on Diddy, I was listening to a bunch of attorneys talking, and I've talked about this in the past. There's this theory about the Johns, the people who procure the prostitutes, right? Well, there's no punishment for the Johns. Now, isn't that convenient, right? So, if there is a crime and there's prostitution involved, the prostitutes are the ones who get into trouble. And I believe that most prostitutes are likely traffic victims, right? So, in this case, because there were no prior cases having to do with prostitution and Johns, because what they will say is, well, we can't show a pattern or get enhanced charges because there are no previous cases. Well, that's right, because there are no previous cases, because they have willfully left that off. So the Johns or the people purchasing the sex for hire or whatever they're purchasing, they get no charges. So did he have all those serious allegations, but the Johns would be possibly his famous friends, politicians are omitted from legal scrutiny because that's how the law has been shifted to make sure it doesn't include any of them, right? To make sure that everybody else gets arrested, but that they don't. Same thing in those snuff films I've talked about. They always have a way that they can, and then the claim that Diddy or others can't be fully prosecuted because there are no previous John cases is a false limitation. So it's not that they don't have any evidence, they choose not to pursue it, right? By saying that, well, no one's done it in the past, so we can't make charges against you now. So that's basically how the Diddy case got hung up on this deal with the Johns and the prostitutes. So anyway, so I started looking into some of these color things, right? Why do they wear those red string bracelets? Well, they wear those red string bracelets because they like the Kabbalah people wear the red string bracelets. And that really led me into all of this purple stuff. The color purple. People always say the royals wore it because it was harder to make that color. Well, I don't think that's true. And I'll also be covering in a bit here, what does Doge mean? Doge means something, and I'll tell you what that means. So, and also, how do U.S. hospitals and these HIPAA things work? For example, I'm always hearing about HIPAA laws to guard your privacy when you're in a hospital. Well, I hate to break it to you, but I'll be going over it more in detail. But the HIPAA laws are a trick. So you're basically signing over things that you're not aware that you're signing over for, and I'll get into that more now in a bit here. So it was interesting this week because Trump had some people from Africa into his office, and of course he was insulting them by telling them how good they spoke English and all kinds of other insulting things. And it appears to me that they're talking about. It was interesting because he met with leaders from Gabon, Guinea, Liberia, and Mauritania. Mauritania was in the meeting, and Senegal at the White House. And they claim that they're setting up these mineral deals, but Rwandan President Paul Kagame did not attend. So I don't know. There's a lot of reasons why he probably did or didn't attend, but it could be a false flag, or it could be they really are talking about minerals in Africa. But always spot the psychopaths because they're always quick to inadvertently insult people, right? Like saying to the one black guy, gee, you really speak good English. Where'd you learn your English from? And he learned it from his country where they teach English. So anyway, so one last thing in the news. There's another thing that got passed in this big, beautiful bill. There's this group called Anduril. Pay attention to this, Anduril Industries. And what they're doing is they're installing these big, big towers, and they're towers for surveillance. The legislation signed into law by President Trump on July the 4th provides significant spending increases to military and law enforcement projects, including over $6 billion for various border security technologies. So they're basically claiming that they're going to be putting up a virtual wall of sensor laden surveillance. Now, well, you do with it what you want. I would say that, well, only one company is doing it, right? First thing that came to my mind was, gee, I wonder how long it would take them to replace those cameras if a laser hit them. Oh, I don't know. I'm just saying, it would seem to me that at some point these people could be kept rather busy replacing cameras versus installing them. Just something you may want to think about. Because today I'm going to be talking more about the doctors. You may have a reason to go to a doctor. You may have a child that may need a doctor, or you may have a friend that needed a doctor. How prepared should you be? I'll tell you some interesting stories at the end of the show here today because if you're in care of somebody else, you better make sure you have your paperwork written up, and I'll have some ideas about what to do there because a lot is going on. They're getting really bold right now. And some of you may or may not remember, but a lot of people got literally murdered in nursing homes when this all got going, right? Nursing homes are a place where people go to get murdered, really. So they have come right out and they made a declarative statement. And it says nursing homes may start sedating your elderly parents and eventually you because they don't have enough workers. So, yes, they already are medicating people in nursing homes because it is a place for euthanasia. So, just be very careful going into any nursing homes. So, let's talk about doctors and what they wear. Well, they wear those white coats, right? White coats really symbolize cleanliness, authority in medicine, scientific objectivity, trust, and professional ethics. Who else wears a garment? Well, priests also wear garments depending on their role, their denomination, or their context. So priests will wear things like that black cassock or a clerical shirt with a white Roman collar. Always with those Romans, right? So during Mass, priests wear long white robes as a symbol of purity. So there's a lot with this white business, right? You got doctors wearing white robes, you got priests running around wearing white robes. So they also wear different colors, right? They wear during Easter, they wear white for Easter and Christmas for purity and joy. They were red for festivals of martyrs or the Holy Spirit, the blood of fire. They were black for funerals of mourning. And where do they wear purple? Well, they wear purple when there's Lent or Advent, penitence. So there's this thing about did the Jews kill Jesus? So I did a little digging around. Remember, I don't understand the Bible, never read the thing, so I'm just going by what I was able to research. So, how did the Jews kill Jesus? Like I'm always saying, get to the beginning, right? So, what the Gospels say. Well, in the New Testament, particularly in the Gospels, there is an account of Jewish religious authorities, like the chief priest or Pharisees, accusing Jesus of blasphemy and bringing him to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. They wanted him executed because they saw him as a threat to religious order and the Roman rule. However, Jesus was crucified by the Romans, not by Jewish individuals or the Jewish people as a whole. Crucifixion was a Roman form of execution reserved for rebels and criminals. Didn't know this. I thought crucifixion was just for hanging up Jesus. So now, under the Romans, crucifixion was reserved for rebels and criminals, okay? Pontius Pilate ultimately gave the order to crucify Jesus. So, only certain Jewish leaders at the time were involved in handing Jesus over to Pilate. The Jewish people as a whole were not collectively responsible. The early church and later Christian leaders wrongly generalized this, leading to centuries of anti Semitism and persecution. See, isn't that funny how that all got going, right? So they claim that the early Christian leaders wrongly generalized this, leading to centuries of anti Semitism and persecution. Interesting, isn't it, how they happened to do that, right? But then in 1965, not that long ago, the Catholic Church officially rejected the idea of collective Jewish guilt for Jesus' death in the document called Nostra Aetate, or the Second Vatican Council. So, up until the year, suspiciously, 1965, there was this feeling among Christians that the Catholic Church had something to do with all this Jewish business, right? But in 1965, the Catholic Church officially rejected the idea of collective Jewish guilt for Jewish's death. It declared that what happened in his passion cannot be charged against all the Jews without distinction, then alive, nor against the Jews of today. So, the false accusation that the Jews killed Jesus fueled the pogroms, forced conversions, expulsions, anti Semitic propaganda, including by the Nazis. So, this was a pretty big deal that the Catholics hung on to this deal about the Jews killed Jesus up until 1965, right? Kind of a long time to hold on to a pretty interesting secret, right? So, in summary, Jesus was executed by the Romans under the governance of Pontius Pilate. Some Jewish religious leaders opposed him and called for his death, but this does not mean the Jews killed Jesus. Blaming all Jews then or now is historically false and morally dangerous. So, the purple robe in the Passion narratives, the purple robe enters the picture. The purple robe appears in the gospel accounts of Jesus' passion as part of the mockery he endured after his arrest and trial, specifically when Roman soldiers made fun of him as a king. So, in scriptures, they have a couple things. The first one is Mark 15:17. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. Matthew 27:28. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. They were calling scarlet purple. So, and another one, the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe. Hmm. So, symbol of royalty. Purple was a rare, expensive dye associated with emperors and kings. Purple was also used to mock Jesus. The soldiers sarcastically treated him like a king, dressing him up, crowning him with thorns, and mocking him with fake reverence. Hail, King of the Jews! It was not a genuine sign of honor, but a form of humiliation. So after Jesus' trial, but before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish religious court, they handed over to Pilate, who was the Roman governor. So Jesus was scourged, whipped by Roman soldiers, mocked with a purple robe and crown of thorns before being led to crucifixion. So then they had this Jewish religious court. Well, the Sanhedrin was the supreme religious council of the Jewish people in the first century. It was made up of chief priests, scribes, and elders led by the high priest. It had authority over religious matters and some legal disputes, but not over capital punishment under Roman rule. After Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was brought to the house of Caiaphas, the high priest, where a nighttime trial was held, an unusual and possibly unlawful move according to Jewish legal standards of the time. So the charges were brought against him in the Jewish court. They accused Jesus primarily of blasphemy, claiming he had spoken sacrilegiously against God. The charges were based on his claim to be the Messiah, his reference to being the Son of God or having a divine relationship with God, statements about destroying the temple and rebuilding it in 3 days, interpreted symbolically by Jesus, but taken literally or offensively by his accusers. False witnesses were brought in, but their testimonies conflicted. Jesus initially remained silent, fulfilling Isaiah's prophecy about the suffering servant. When directly asked if he was the Messiah, Jesus answered affirmatively, which was seen as blasphemy by the council. The high priest tore his robes in outrage, symbolizing that Jesus had committed a serious offense. The Sanhedrin condemned Jesus to death, but under Roman law, they did not have the power to carry out the execution. Therefore, they brought Jesus to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, to seek a formal death sentence, reframing the religious charge of blasphemy as a political crime, claiming to be the king of the Jews, which would threaten Roman authority. The trial was religious in nature, but it used to initiate a Roman execution. Not all Jewish leaders or people were involved. The trial was limited to a group of religious authorities. This moment has often been misused historically to blame all Jews, which is historically and morally incorrect. Yeah, but they certainly let that story run wild until 1965 now, didn't they? So what do Jews teach about Jesus? So Jesus is not recognized as the Messiah in Judaism. He is generally reviewed as a Jewish man, possibly a teacher or rabbi who lived and preached in the first century. Jews do not accept him as divine, the Son of God, or part of a trinity. These ideas conflict with the strict Jewish belief in the oneness of God. According to Jewish tradition, the Messiah must be a descendant of King David. The Messiah must rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, gather all Jews back to the land of Israel, bring peace, and cause the whole world to worship one God. Since these events did not occur during Jesus's lifetime or afterwards, Jews do not accept him as fulfilling the messianic prophecies. There are very few references to Jesus in classical Jewish texts like the Talmud, and they're often cryptic, possibly censored, or subject to historical controversy. Many rabbis throughout history have simply avoided commenting in detail on Jesus out of theological clarity or safety under Christian rule. So, what do Jews teach about that purple robe? Well, the purple robe is not a subject of Jewish religious teaching because it appears only in the New Testament. And these texts are not accepted as scripture in Judaism. Since Jews do not recognize the New Testament as divine revelation, they do not teach or comment religiously on events such as Jesus being mocked with a robe. Now, isn't that convenient? So, According to these people, because the Jews do not recognize the New Testament as a divine revelation, well, they just don't teach it, nor do they comment on it, right? So, some Jewish historians or scholars may discuss the purple robe as a Roman practice of mockery toward someone accused of claiming kingship, but this is treated as a historical detail, not a theological event. In that context, the purple robe would symbolize Roman irony and scorn, not a fulfillment of any Jewish prophecy or symbolism. Because Judaism does not teach that Jesus was the Messiah or divine. So, and the purple robe, it's because of that New Testament deal, right? Oh, with some exclusions. So, why Jews seem passive in their teachings about Jesus? Judaism does not center Jesus in its theology, so it doesn't have an active position on him the way Christianity does. After the early split between Judaism and the Jesus involvement in the first and second century, Jesus became irrelevant to Jewish religious life. Jewish texts do not develop doctrines around his life, death, or significance. After centuries of persecution by Christian authorities, many Jewish scholars avoided public commentary on Jesus to stay safe, or just to kind of keep the keep hidden what they want to hide, right? So, from a Jewish perspective, they do not feel the need to defend a role in Jesus' death because Jesus is not part of their religious figures. The robe, the crucifixion, or mockery scenes are not part of Jewish scripture, so they are not subjects of theological reflection. Jewish writings focus instead on Torah, law, ethics, and messianic expectations still to be fulfilled. Why did the church ban the Jews for centuries? While the Gospels clearly place the crucifixion under Roman authority, certain verses, especially Matthew 27:25, his blood be on us and on our children, were historically used by Christian authorities to claim that the Jews killed Jesus. Over time, this turned into collective blame of the entire Jewish people, not just certain leaders at the time. Accusations of deicide, which means God killers, which became central to medieval Christian anti Semitism. Church endorsed pogroms, forced conversions, expulsions, ghettos, and eventually ideologicals that helped justify the Holocaust. So, when did it all change? 1965, the turning point. The Second Vatican Council, they issued that Nostra Aetate, which officially stated what happened in his passion cannot be charged against all the Jews without distinction, then alive, nor against the Jews of today. This was the first time, pay attention to this was the first time in almost 2,000 years that the Catholic Church clearly rejected the idea that the Jews as a people killed Jesus, and it acknowledged the following. The gospel accounts have been misunderstood and misused. Gee, this is starting to sound like all their little laws, isn't it? So anti Semitism was wrong and incompatible with Christian teaching. Yeah, it does seem rather hateful to me. So this marked the beginning of modern Jewish Christian reconciliation, and it happened in 1965. Let that sink in. So it seems odd because Judaism disengaged from the story of Jesus early on, focusing on its own religious development. Meanwhile, Christianity focused intensely on Jesus' death, sometimes in ways that distorted history and fueled centuries of Jewish persecution. Gee, isn't that interesting how that all happened, right? Only in the 20th century did serious efforts begin to correct the theological and historical record. Boy, quite a bad thing for the record to all of a sudden not bother correcting it until 1965. The charge against the Jews was embedded in early Christian writing, especially as the church sought to distance itself from Judaism and define its identity. By the time Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire during the 4th century, this narrative became institutionalized, and the Jewish people were cast as Christ killers. Over time, this developed into what some historians call the teaching of contempt, the idea that Jews had rejected God, lost their covenant, and deserved to suffer. It was reinforced for centuries through sermons, art, laws, and church teaching. The idea persisted subtly or explicitly. Jews were forced to live in ghettos, wear badges, suffer economic restrictions, and endure mob violence. It was only after the horrors of the Holocaust that the Catholic Church began a serious reassessment of its theology toward Jews. Gee, just in time, right? So, also, there's this wrong symbolism I'll be getting to in a minute. So, just as the rod of Equipus, there's one snake called when there's one snake, it's called the rod of Equipus, and the other is called the caduceus. They're often confused. So I'll be getting more to that in a minute. So somehow it took centuries for them to get this straight, right? So why did it last so long? Well, because the church held enormous culture and political power throughout Europe for much of history. Yeah, because I would have to argue because the church is behind this whole plot, this whole new matrix we're living in, right? The church, Washington, D.C., and the city of London. They're the players in this thing. So admitting error would challenge that authority and upset centuries of belief systems. Yeah, pretty big error if you ask me. Only in the modern era, with the growth of biblical scholarship, historical understanding, and interfaith dialogue, and the aftermath of genocide, did real change begin. So, it was a big deal, a misrepresentation with enormous consequences, and it persisted because power structures benefited from it. And the theological inertia took centuries to overcome. Only recently has there been any real effort to correct it publicly and rebuild trust. So, what came along in the meantime? Well, Zionism. Zionism is a political and ideological movement that supports the establishment and preservation of a Jewish homeland in Israel. It began in the late 1800s and led to the founding of the State of Israel in 1948. This support of Americans supporting Zionism is strong even among evangelist Christians, and it's rooted in both theological and political alliances. Many evangelists believe the return of Jews to Israel fulfills Old Testament prophecy. They see the modern state of Israel as part of God's plan, especially tied to end time prophecy and the second coming of Christ. This view is sometimes called Christian Zionism. Based on Genesis 12:3, the quote is, I will bless those who bless you. Many Christians believe supporting Israel brings spiritual blessings. Pastors and churches often promote this idea and encourage donations to Israeli causes or trips to the Holy Land. Trips to Israel, like to Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Sea of Galilee, are seen as spiritual pilgrimages, helping believers walk where Jesus walked. This builds emotional ties between American Christians and the land of Israel. Since the 1970s to 1980s, the U.S. political right, especially the religious right, aligned strongly with pro Israel foreign policy. Groups like Christians United for Israel lobby for military and political support of Israel. So they say that not all Jews are comfortable with Christian Zionist support, especially when it's tied to apostolic beliefs that ultimately see Jews converting or being judged at the end of time. Some see this support as conditional or instrumental rather based on genuine respect. Christian Palestinians often feel abandoned by Western Christians who support Israel without understanding the human rights concerns of Palestinians. This has caused division in the global church. For centuries, Christian Europe demonized Jews. Now, many U.S. Christians romanticize Israel in ways that can ignore complex realities on the ground. Some scholars see this as trading one extreme or hatred for another idealization without engaging Jewish identity and political with nuance. So many American Christians are strong supporters of Zionism, often for religious and political reasons. There is a major reversal from centuries of Christian anti Semitism, but it's not without controversy, both theologically and geopolitically. It remains questions about genuine solidarity versus strategic theology. So, yeah, this all comes from them. And also, another thing I'll be talking about, um, they have this interpretation the seven mountains refer to Rome, known as the city of seven hills. The woman sitting on the beast was often understood to excuse me, let me start over again. Let's talk about this purple business. So, a woman is described and called Babylon the Great, a figure of corruption, wealth, and power, drunk on the blood of saints. The seven heads of the beast she rides are described as seven mountains and also seven kings. This imagery has been interpreted symbolically, not literally, in most theological traditions. The seven mountains refer to Rome, famously known as a city of seven hills. The woman sitting on the beast was often understood to represent imperial Rome, or later corrupt religious power, as claimed by some Protestant reformers against the Catholic Church. In modern prophet circles, particularly among evangelists, conspiracy theorists, and some independent researchers, the verse has been reinterpreted to suggest other global centers of power, including Washington, D.C. Some claim that Washington, D.C. also sits on seven hills or elevated points, trying to link it to Revelation 17. The supposed hills include Capitol Hill, Meridian Hill, Floral Hills, Forest Hills, Hillbrook, Hillcross, Knox Hill. This is debated. Not all of these areas actually are geographically hills. Some are just neighborhood names, but the symbolism is Washington, D.C. is a modern Babylon, a global center of political power, military force, espionage, and cultural influence. The city's design with Masonic architecture The obelisk, of course, which is the Washington Monument, and occult symbolism is often cited in these theories. The woman that they interpret as the woman on the beast is sometimes seen as a symbol of spiritual apostasy, a false church or compromised religious system, or a broader metaphor for worldly power aligned against God, often blending political, economic, and religious control. Some say this fits Rome as the Vatican, Washington as a U.S. power, or a future global system combining finance, politics, and religion, New World Order style thinking. So some interpreters connect Revelation 17 to Washington, D.C., claiming it may represent a modern Babylon sitting on 7 hills as a center of global influence. This interpretation is not mainstream, but it's widespread in end times prophecy circles, especially those concerned with globalism, Freemasonry, and political corruption. So, the color purple. The color purple, they even did a movie about the color purple with Oprah Winfrey. Um, I took a look into the movie, oh, I don't know, in the last year or two, and this is a real kicker. So, the color purple, the movie, when they open the color purple of the movie, what is the first thing they show? I kid you not, people wearing fez hats. I'm not kidding. Right in the opening of the movie, they have people wearing fez hats. So I did have to figure out what that was all about. So the color purple does appear to serve as a hidden link or sacred thread tying it together. The purple also is, according to ancient pagan royal traditions, royal imperial authority, mockery of Jesus using the passion, the harlot of Babylon seductive power. And so the harlot of Babylon was also wearing purple. So in ancient Mesopotamia, Persia, and Egypt, purple was reserved for the gods, kings, and priesthood. In Rome, only the emperor could wear the toga picta, a fully purple garment symbolizing divine authority. The dye is called Tyrian purple, came from murasic snails and was incredibly expensive and used to separate the ruling class from the commoners. And that this doesn't make sense to me because a snail does not make the color purple. The color purple comes from mixing blue and red together. You get purple. That's anyway. So yeah, that's how you get purple. So where this snail business comes in, I don't really know. So if you ever looked into color, it's pretty simple to figure out. You mix colors together to get other colors. You don't have one bug that's specifically one color. So after Constantine legalized Christianity in the 4th century, the church began adopting imperial symbolism like purple, gold thrones, and incense. This blending of Christian theology with Roman imperial aesthetics created a hybrid system. As the church gained political power, it absorbed many outward symbols of the Roman Empire, purple among them. So Jesus was mocked as a false king while wearing a purple robe. Yet the church later used the same color to declare authority and sacredness. Some argue this is not reclaiming, but repeating the insult, unconsciously or otherwise. So, in the book of Revelation, they portray Babylon as a symbol for powerful, corrupt, religious political empire wearing purple and scarlet. The harlot of Babylon is not portrayed as an outsider, but as a spiritually unfaithful, opulent, seductive figure. Many reformers identified her with the Roman Catholic Church due to its wealth, abuses, and use of the color purple. So, bishops, cardinals, and even monarchs who often mix religion and state still wear purple or scarlet. These colors often signal status, exclusivity, and ritual power, much like in pagan temple systems. Critics argue this represents an unbroken elitist priestly class that never fully shed its pagan DNA. Yeah, I would be in that bank of people because whenever this whole takeover happened, whenever these whole churches got created, it appears to me that the one who came out on top was the Catholic Church, right? And so they claim that purple symbolizes royalty and divinity in paganism. It also symbolizes empire and control in Rome. It also symbolizes mockery and suffering in the Gospels. Purple also symbolizes corruption and seduction in Revelation. Then it's still used today in religious leadership garments. Is it honoring Christ or echoing empire? Is it humility or hidden hubris? Is it Christian or continuity with ancient priestcraft or pagan? The church's use of purple may indeed be a subconscious or deliberate continuation of pagan and imperial traditions. While the church claims it's symbolic of penitence and reverence, the visual and historical lineage cannot be ignored. It serves as a powerful example of how old systems survive by adapting, even in sacred robes. So, yeah, I think that purple is a pretty big deal. And the fact that the priests and the people in the Catholic Church are roaming around wearing those purple robes, I think it speaks to their pagan past and that never left or the pagans took over. However, it worked out. The pagans are running the Catholic Church, is how I interpret this at all. So let's take a little break here and first talk about Doge, and then I need to take a break here. So, what does Doge mean? You know, Doge, they're saying DOGE, wiping out the government using this Doge thing, right? Well, um, Doge actually, I will go, let's see here. Oh, I have Doge in a minute here. Let me hang on here a second. Okay. Um, yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's talk first before Doge about hospitals. When you step foot into a hospital, you must consider it enemy territory. You might get held. It happened to me. They hold the power. Can they kill someone while you watch? Sure, they can, unless you have the paperwork. So, how banks and hospitals are cashing in when patients can't pay for health care. U.S. hospitals started as charitable institutions in the late 1800s, funded by wealthy donors and religious organizations. Now, isn't this another interesting date, right? Hospitals were started by the wealthy. Would we use before hospitals? Well, we had our own cures, right? The mission was focused on health care and care for the poor. It was clear where the money came from, clear where it went. So, for example, one Bergen County hospital that started in 1880 with 12 beds is now part of a system with 28 hospitals. So, hospitals are big business, and let me see here. And there's a bunch of crazy things about hospitals. I'll just kind of sort of talk about them a tiny bit, but not my point for today. But there's this other thing about hospitals. As hospital systems grow, they often begin to act more like for profit institutions while even maintaining not for profit status. The source and use of their funds becomes both more complicated and less transparent. So does their mission, their relationship to local communities, and their relationship to their employees and physicians. So it's now common for not-for-profit hospitals who also own and provide financing to and for-profit subsidies. It's now common for them to also have profit entities operating from their tax-exempt property. They also engage in profit sharing with their physicians. They also pay hospital CEOs millions. So there's a bunch of squishiness about how first of all, if I ran a nonprofit the way hospitals run this nonprofit, you would lose that nonprofit status, okay? So there's all kinds of crazy ways these hospitals run. And the biggest way they run is they also are a huge drain on the local economy because they don't pay taxes. So everybody else pays taxes but them. See how this all goes? So I'm now at the Doge part. So let me tell about this Doge part. So the term Doge refers historically to the elected chief magistrate of the Republic of Venice and the Republic of Genoa. The word derives from the Venetian Doge, rooted in the Latin word do, meaning leader or commander. It is etymologically related to duke in English or dukes in Italian. The office of Doge emerged in the early medieval period around the 8th century and lasted until the fall of the Venetian Republic in 1797. The Doge was elected for life through a complex and deliberately restricted process that involved multiple councillors and layers of selection, ensuring that no single family or faction could dominate. While the position initially held executive and military authority, by the latter centuries, the Doge had become largely ceremonial. Real power rested in the oligarchic councils composed of wealthy merchant and noble families. So when George I ascended the throne in 1714, he knew he was a Doge, the premise interface of an oligarchy. So this is a metaphorical use of Doge. Following the Glorious Revolution of 1688, the British monarchy became constitutionally limited, with power increasingly residing in Parliament and among landed and financial elites. By the time George I took the throne, the king functioned more as a figurehead. The passage compares this limited monarch power to that of a ceremonial doge, an emblem of government led by an elite ruling class. So in the 21st century, the word doge has taken on an entirely unrelated meaning in popular culture. The modern use of doge began as a misspelling of dog and evolved into a meme featuring a Siberia Inu dog named Kabushu. This meme became popular in 2010 and is characterized by humorous internal monologue captions written in broken English, often using phrases like such wow, very scare, or much noble. This stylized speech is known as Doge speak. So that's what Doge is. They took Doge, which was a elected ceremonial head of state in Venice or Genoa, which was part of a ruling oligarchy. And for this century, they turned it into a humorous internet meme featuring a Shiba Inu, a stylized cartoon. So that is a thing with Doge. And there's the Count Marco Doria is a modern descendant. Anyway, so historically, the Doge was a symbol of a symbolic head of a powerful aristocratic republic. In modern times, Doge is best used as an internet theme and the namesake of a cryptocurrency. So I'm going to be taking a break because when I come back, I'll be talking for a bit about what these HIPAA laws mean. And I also have what the laws mean for Europe. So I'll be back in a bit. Okay, I'm not going to spend. It's funny because in the first segment, I barely could
have any audio, and now I'm like at full blast. But anyways, I'm not going to cover a lot about HIPAA because I have all the details down below. Bottom line, I think HIPAA was a trick to get people to talk to their doctors because, for example, if you say to your doctor, doctor, ever since I've been having trouble sleeping, I've been smoking marijuana at nighttime, and I just want to let you know. Well, that's fine. Yeah. Your doctor says, okay. And he writes it down in your chart, right? Well, what happens 10 years down the road? You get in a major car accident, a few people are killed or something, right? And they say, well, did you know that 10 years ago she told her doctor that she often smokes pot in the evening before she goes to sleep? And when did this accident happen? During the night. She was probably loaded on pot. She probably did it. So yeah, they can then twist that information around on you. That's what my suspicious mind says. But first, let me tell you what they claim it is. HIPAA was meant to protect patient privacy by requiring doctors, hospitals, and insurers to secure identifiable health information and give patients the right to access their records, request corrections, and control certain disclosures. It set the national standards for digital healthcare transactions and data security. Sounds like very, very helpful stuff, that doesn't it? Why do I always say evil has to come packaged as help? So HIPAA only applies to specified entities, not to tech companies, fitness apps, employers, or insurers in many situations. Apps and wellness programs collecting health data often operate outside of HIPAA's reach. All those handy apps that everybody has on their phone, yeah, those are collecting data like a mad dog on you right now. Why do you think they give you free apps? Because they want to track you. They want your information for free instead of paying you for it. So what happens is this, covered entities can share your data without your consent for treatment, for payment, for healthcare operations. A vague term used often stretched to include data analytics, partnerships, and marketing. They label that healthcare operations. This allows hospitals and insurers to share your data with third parties, partner with companies like Google, Amazon, and Palantir, build AI tools using your data without needing direct consent. So HIPAA allows the use or sale of de-identified data stripped of 18 identifiers, but in reality, AI and cross-reference databases can re-identify individuals. Companies like Google have used de-identified data in large-scale projects like the Ascension deal. So they claim that HIPAA wasn't designed to deceive, but its outline framework strips individuals of control in the age of big data. It enables quiet collection and aggregation of sensitive health data. It allows governments and corporations to benefit from personal information without meaningful consent. HIPAA sounds like a privacy shield, but often works as a legal gateway for institutional surveillance and commercial use. So yes, and they're using these HIPAA laws all over the world. They've got them in China under PIPPL, Japan, APPI, South Korea, PIPA. And yes, all of the world has pretty much adopted the same kind of thing. But of course, the United States is the weakest and the worst as far as sharing of data. So most countries allow sharing of what they call de-identified data. But de-identified also means pseudo-analyzed, not fully anonymous, and is still re-identifiable with modern tools. So yeah, it's going on all over, and everybody has HIPAA was passed in 1996 to protect privacy, but in practice, it only applies to limited actors. It allows broad data sharing without consent. It enables the use of de-identified data that can often be re-identified. Globally, most countries have stronger protection, but still allow similar loopholes under the cover of anonymization. The result, a vast shadow market of personal health data used for AI, surveillance, marketing, and profiling, often without true patient knowledge or consent. So that's how they got your information. And what they will ask you to do if you go into a U.S. hospital or any hospital in the world, they will ask you to sign this HIPAA form before they treat you. And I have all the information you want to find. There's a group that's getting all the information out on this HIPAA and this ID program that's coming down the pike. I would caution you, don't go overboard. Like, for example, if you think, yeah, HIPAA, I'm not giving up my information. When next time I go to a hospital, I'm not signing anything. Well, certainly you can try that. Certainly, they legally can't probably do much to you, but could they do something to you? Well, of course they could. And do you really want to make this a hill you're standing on? So you go to the hospital, you've got your elderly parent or your young child, they need services. Is the hill you're going to stand on, I'm not signing this HIPAA form? Well, that's what you're going to be encouraged to do in the future. People are encouraging people to not sign those HIPAA forms. I would advise you to do what is in your best interest. If you need to get somebody treated and it's a critical situation, do you really want to draw red flags all over your own back right at that moment? I would have to say, use caution. Don't walk into a place, which being a hospital, that you have absolutely no control of and start making demands. You're going to immediately skyrocket to the top of their list. So I would be very, very cautious before I pick up any charge and say, yeah, I'm not going to sign anything. Does it really matter? Does it really matter anymore? I don't know that it does matter, but just to be aware, you need to be aware these things are out there, because I'll have much more in a little bit here about why you want to have other paperwork in place, because if you're dealing with somebody who's not your blood relative, you're going to run into trouble if you don't have the right paperwork. But first, let's get into this snake business. So, the rod of Asclepius, and Asciepius, Asclepius, is the correct symbol of medicine. The rod of Asclepius. That is a single snake coiled around a staff or a rod with no wings, okay? And that snake was named after Asclepius, the Greek god of healing and medicine. The staff that the snake is going around represents healing, and the snake symbolizes rejuvenation due to shedding of the skin. It was used in ancient Greece in temples of healing. They were called Asclepians. It was later adopted by major medical associations like the World Health Organization, who are you going to call, and the American Medical Association. But there's a big but here. There's also the other snake that you see is called the caduceus, Caduceus. That is often mistaken as a medical symbol. And that snake is not such a good snake, okay? So basically, the medical logo is there's two snakes intertwined around a winged staff. And that is associated with Hermes or Mercury, the Roman, okay? Hermes was the god of commerce, travel, and trickery, not healing. The caduceus symbolizes negotiation, balance, and communications. So it was used all that time, okay, until 18th and 19th century. Isn't that interesting? Medical institutions began using classical symbols, and then the confusion with the caduceus begins. Funny thing to be confused about, right? There's only two snakes, and they get them confused, supposedly. So how'd they get them confused? Well, in 1902, the U.S. Army Medical Corps mistakenly adopted the caduceus, the evil snake, right? In 1910, the American Medical Association adopts the Asclepius, the rod of a Asclepius snake. In 1948, the World Health Organization, who are you going to call? They also adopted the rod of Asclepius. So why did the rod of Asclepius get picked up by these people? Well, who knows, right? Because according to what they're saying, in 1902, the U.S. Medical Corps adopted the caduceus. So they adopted the snake, which was the tricklet. Hermes was associated with trade, deceit, and messages not healing. Some justify its use for military medical due to the messenger role, but that's not really true. So despite over 100 years of criticism, the Army has never reversed it. This symbol became entrenched in logos, uniforms, and branding. Civilian use of the caduceus increased, especially in the United States. Did anybody attempt to change it? Well, medical historians and professional groups have protested. However, military tradition and bureaucratic inertia have blocked the change. So isn't that just interesting that right around 1902, the U.S. Army adds the snake that has to do with commerce and trickery? So the rod of Asclepius is a true symbol of medicine. The widespread use of the caduceus began with a military mistake in 1902 and persists today mainly due to tradition and misunderstanding. Well, you call it a tomato, I call it a tomato. I think this was a complete and utter on-purpose trick, right? Because let's not forget, the Vatican also means serpent. Vatican, divining serpent, from Latin, means divider, and serpent under can. The dragon serpent gave him, the Roman Catholic Church, his power, his throne, and great authority. Rome is seated among 7 mountains, fulfilling Revelations. And it is the symbolism of serpents, medicine, Vatican, and biblical prophecy. So yeah, they got the second snake around 1902. 2 snakes on a winged staff. The caduceus, a symbol of Hermes, not medicine. Hermes was a god of commerce, trickery, and messaging, not healing. Mistake, this was a bureaucratic error. Well, I don't think it was error at all, yet it spread widely in American medical imagery. The correct medical symbol is the rod of Asclepius, 1 snake, no wings. So the Vatican also has that snake name, right? The Vatican is said to come from vatis, which is Latin for prophet or diviner, and can, which is interpreted by some as serpent. Most etymologists link Vaticanus to an ancient Roman hill, not a literal divining serpent. However, the association with divination is valid. The area was linked to augurs and oracles in pre-Christian Rome. Symbolic interpretation sees this as fulfillment of Revelation 13:2. The dragon gave the beast his power and throne and great authority. Revelation 17:9 states that 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Rome is famously called the city on 7 hills, matching the prophetic description. Many Protestant reformers, such as Martin Luther and John Knox, interpreted this passage as referring to the Roman Catholic Church. So where is the symbolism? The dragon and the serpent in Revelation consistently represents Satan. The beast receiving power from the dragon, often interpreted as a worldly or false religion system empowered by evil. The imagery of snakes in medicine via the caduceus and the serpent-linked Vatican name is seen by some as symbolic alignment. The two snake symbol in medicine reflects a system driven by commerce and control, not healing. The Vatican symbolism and authority fulfill apocalyptic prophecy. Critics argue the etymology is not conclusive. Medical aid and religious symbols evolved through complex historical layers, not a unified conspiracy. Well, I disagree with that. They can say what they want, but right there, why did they change it? Why did the U.S. Army add the second snake if they didn't mean it for that, right? So the caduceus is the one with two snakes, mistaken medical symbol tied to commerce. So yeah. And we have the Vatican dragon said to mean divining serpent, and that the serpent is a symbol of Satan. So yeah, I see it all kind of comes around the same thing, right? So and then we have that Whore Babylon business, right? The Whore Babylon sitting there in those purple robes. Ancient pagan royal traditions, Roman imperial authority, mockery of Jesus during the Passover, the harlot of Babylon, seductive power, modern and political power structures. So why is the Roman Church considered to be a whore? If you look at history, the Roman Catholic Church system is a continuation of what God's looking at with pagan Rome. Pagan Rome was filled with idolatry, and they persecuted Christians. If you study history, you're going to find out that the Roman Catholic system transitioned to a secular power to religious power. Secular leaders of Rome put on religious costumes, and that's where priests, bishops, and eventually popes came into existence. That is a matter of fact, even in secular schools. If you read one of their ancient writings, a great example is Beowulf. During that time, they thought that the pagan god was the exact same as Jesus, as Christians' God. At that time, they were mingling so much paganism with Roman Catholicism, that's where it became more of Roman Catholics. During the first century, the Catholic Church was not even called Catholic at that time. The system was born through that Roman system, and that word came to be later on. Bishops and priests didn't get their names in the early centuries, even though they existed. They got those titles until much later on. The Roman Catholic Church has a history of paganism as well as persecution. Didn't Rome persecute the Christians before it came the Roman Catholic Church? Well, yes. The first persecution of Christians recognized in history was actually by the Roman Empire. That's the official persecution. Concerning local persecution, we know it started when Stephen and his own people, the Jews. The woman riding on the beast killed Christians. The woman riding on a seven-headed beast, the woman is called Babylon by God, but she is known as the Roman Catholic Church. One of the keys is its history of persecution. Roman Catholic has an infamous history of persecution called the Inquisition. During the timeline of the Inquisition, they literally killed, the smallest number is thousands, the largest number is millions. That's even more than Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany. Catholic scholars don't like those numbers because it makes them look bad, eviler than Adolf Hitler. Because of that, they try to make excuses saying it's only thousands. If you compare the population statistics, they'll record the Black Plague there, which obviously wiped out a huge number of the world. But you're going to notice something strange, where there's still a huge drop of numbers and a very small growth. When you total all of that, it's actually millions. One of their arguments is that in order to do that, they had to burn hundreds of or thousands of people in one day. Thing is, they did. They might argue saying that you can't do that without every burning, because when you burn a person at the stake, it takes hours. Have they not heard of mass burnings? That's what they were infamous for. They surrounded families, women, and children in one bonfire and burned them up. That's how they quickly finished the job. The Jesuits, masters in torture and undercover work. The Jesuits were especially infamous for specializing in tortures and doing conspiracy tactics. The Jesuits were one of the earliest people, if not the earliest, who specialized in being undercover agents within politics, kings, and governments. These guys are incredibly powerful because Jesuits are small size. When you look at history or even current events today, they dominate as scholars in universities. The Jesuits are PhDs, they're scholars, they're brilliant guys who can speak several languages. The Pope used to be a Jesuit. They survived approximately 200 years of suppression. There were Protestant nations kicking out Jesuits, and then it came down to Catholic nations. Those guys had a high value of Jesuits, but they kicked out 2 Jesuits. It was so bad that even the Pope himself kicked out the Jesuits. Why? Because that's how brilliant these guys were. They were doing cup poisonings everywhere, assassination attempts. In fact, in the gunpowder plot, Guy Fawkes and Robert Catesby were connected to Jesuits. The best candidate for the woman, the Vatican. If you look at current events, name any system in the entire world today, and even throughout history, that is the best candidate or the best prospect of both religious and secular power. There's only one city that has religious and political power. That's the Vatican. Not even Mecca and all other Muslim nations have that kind of capabilities. The Pope is the one who holds ecumenical meetings with all kinds of religious systems around the world, and the Pope is the one who meets secular politicians and kings of nations. There is no better candidate where you think about persecution history, a combination of religious and political power. Not only their system is female. Why do they call the Roman Catholic Church? They call it Mother Church. Even common Catholics will ask, why is it more about Mary than about Jesus? In Revelation 17, she is known as Babylon. She is known to have a cup in her hand. What religious believes in having a cup for worship service? She is known for the blood of martyrs throughout history. This is all screaming plain as day that the Roman Catholic Church system. Revelation, he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Notice that this scarlet-covered beast that she is sitting on, the beast is red in color. He has 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. She is dressed in purple and red. What religious system has purple and red? Not only that, they would wear those colors while holding a cup. What religious system decks themselves with gold and precious stones, pearls, and holding a golden cup? Notice that not only the woman is dressed in red, but the beast is also dressed up in red. What demonic figure is a red-colored figure having 7 heads and 10 horns? Go back to Revelation 12:3. This is the particular beast that she's riding on, and that beast is Satan. The Roman Catholic Church's foundation is sitting on Satan. That's how the Lord sees it. Revelation 12:3. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, holding 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. The Roman Catholic Church is sitting in its seat, and its seat is Satan itself. If her seat is Satan, where is Satan's seat? Remember, the term Satan's seat, we know that it has to be Rome. Everything adds up with the verses when you look at the best prospects in today's timeline, in the past, and even scientifically predicted in the future what their actions are going to be. You can see it's tied to the Roman Catholic Church. And there's another thing. John is carried away in the spirit into the wilderness. And the Revelation said, so they carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So John is at a spiritual plane, and God, in this spiritual power, takes John away from the wilderness. Here's something powerful about the book of Revelation. It's not in a sequence timeline. Notice the word, he carried me away in the spirit. What did we argue before when you divide Revelation by chapters? It's not in chronological time events. You can't divide it that way. You have to divide it literally as the book is titled, Revelation. Revelation means a spiritual vision or transaction. When God gives a spiritual revelation, he can carry you from one domain to a different domain, jumping you to a different timeline, to a different person, to a different symbolism, to a literal place. That's why it's literally called Revelation. This is evident that this is not in time sequence, but more of a spiritual, visual movie. That's a sequential order. When God speaks, he's speaking in a spiritual plane. Spiritual plane is not bound by time, matter, space. It's everywhere. That's why the Holy Spirit can be everywhere. He is not bound by the laws of science. Verse 3 is proof of that. Revelations, Babylon is gone, falls to the ground, and all of a sudden in chapter 17 it starts. No, that doesn't make any sense at all. Look at verse 3 carefully. It says, God has spiritually carried John to a wilderness. He's in a different spiritual world. This being over here has a lot of names of blasphemy that you want to know about. Why is that very telling? Because the Antichrist wants to put his name on your forehead. The Antichrist beast, not Satan's beast in Revelation 13, has a name of blasphemy on its forehead. Satan has names of blasphemy as well. For Satan, it's not really known. For the Antichrist, we can guess it's or 666. When you look at scripture, the names of blasphemy, the only clue you find is 666. Not only that, Revelation 13 says that the mark of the beast's name and number is 666. Then perhaps the beast could have its name as 666 as well, but that's not really known yet. So in Revelation 17:4, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. Give me a second here. Well, I'm going to be, I look more into this pagan business. Purple Purple was where they mocked Jesus with. That's where the whole purple thing came from. I'm going to put this on hold for a second here. Then there's this claim, the New World Order aims to unite all religions under the Catholic Church. And that's what people seem to be thinking. The New World Order is a globalist agenda to unite nations, governments, economies, and religions into one centralized system. In the religious sphere, the claim says the Catholic Church, led by the Pope, will be at the top, acting as the spiritual head of this global system. Other religions like Protestants, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism would be forced to either submit, blend, or be absorbed into a unified one world religion. So that is the goal here. I'm going to put some hold again for right here. I have everything you want to know as far as all of these religious quotes and stuff down below, but just in recap, the color red, that's for Satan, bloodshed, war, and pride. The color blue, truth, heavenly, authority, and purity. You notice most flags have red and blue on them, right? And then, of course, you mix red with blue and you get purple, fusion of red and blue. False holiness, counterfeit kingship. Yeah. Probably also, I just realized why they have all women wearing pearl necklaces because of this harlot business, right? Wearing pearls. Um, yeah, women really thought that they had to have a set of pearls. That was kind of like a rite of passage thing. So I know my mom bought sets of pearls for all of us. So, okay, they have all of us doing all these satanic things, right? We don't even know it. So, the Whore of Babylon wore purple and scarlet, and the Catholic hierarchy wear the same colors. Jesus was mocked in a purple robe. Yeah, now it's a clerical symbol. Satan is red, and purple is red and blue, can be viewed as truth blended with corruption. So, yeah, I think it's right there, right in front of us. They say that, now, I don't know that any of this is true, but the color purple, the film opens with a church possession, a sacred setting. The men are wearing fez hats. So the color purple, they're wearing fez hats. They say it's dignity and brotherhood, fraternal and spiritual, possibly a nod to Afrocentric spiritual traditions or Moorish identity within that community. Yeah, I think we have a lot to do with those Moorish people now, don't we? All those red fez hats became the top hat that they still wear that top hat today. And they said that the filmmakers, especially Steven Spielberg and Alice Walker, the original author, often included intentional visual cues. And the fez hat, especially in red, connects visually and symbolically to masculine authority, religious and fraternal leadership, and cultural reclamation. So yeah, they had that red fez hat and the color purple movie. Doesn't just make it just too crazy, right? So red, purple, and black. Red, passion, life force, blood, violence. Black, death, void, mystery, occult. Purple, royalty, power, mystery, high status, often viewed as a fusion of earthly power, red, and hidden on occult energy, black. So that's why these Satanists also wear red and black. Santa Claus is an anagram for Satan, and Santa Claus also wears red, right? He wears a black belt. Remember, I became a hat expert when I did that show a few years ago when I discovered that Santa Claus was wearing the same hat as a Pope. So, yes, they all of these things intermix. So, yeah, I think that the colors mean a lot here. And that color red has to do with Saturn. Saturn, the Roman god, equated with the Greek god Kronos, is often linked with time, discipline, restriction, and death. The color black, but also red in certain rituals or magical contexts. In some strands of Western, particularly ritual magic, Saturn's associations can bleed into red due to connections with blood, sacrifice, war, and even binding. And the Kabbalah people, they wear those red string bracelets. And that what got me started this whole thing was, why do some of those people wear those red string bracelets? Well, it's because the Kabbalah crowd is the crowd, remember, that also believes in reincarnation, right? And that Kabbalah crowd is with people like Madonna. And I have all their pictures down below. Ashton Kutcher wears a red bracelet. They wear these red string bracelets, and that is a nod to Satan and Saturn, right? Britney Spears wears it. Paris Hilton wears it. Gwyneth Paltrow wears it. Leonardo DiCaprio wears it. David Beckman, Ariana Grande, Mick Jagger, Angelina Jolie. Yeah, they're all wearing those red string bracelets, and that is a nod to Saturn. So let me tell you a little story about why it's not safe to go into a hospital. I mentioned this in the past. There was a person from the Franklin case named Troy Boner. Troy Boner, I think he was a shill in the case. I think that he was probably a disturbed kid who got convinced to play a part in all this because he was kind of brought into the case and nobody really knew where he came from. But anyways, Troy was a young man who became a key figure in the Franklin Credit Union case. And you notice how they word these things, right? Franklin Credit Union case. They don't mention Boys Town, raping boys and all that stuff, right? The boys always get left off of these things. So Troy Boner provided sworn testimony supporting allegations of child abuse and trafficking involving powerful individuals in Nebraska and Washington, D.C. And Troy Boner was prominently mentioned in John DeCamp's 1992 book, The Franklin Cover-Up, Child Abuse, Satanism, and Murder in Nebraska, which detailed an alleged elite pedophile ring tied to the Franklin Credit Union and political circle. This was pre-Epstein. So Bonner was brought in. He really corroborated claims by Alicia Owen and others. So I think that Boner was just brought into the case and he agreed to things that they wanted to bring forward. And later he recanted and said that he lied. So did he lie? Yeah, I think he was a kid probably caught in a tough situation. So what happened was that I have all the information down below, but the bottom line is this: Troy became very upset that when John DeCamp's book came out, I think he was in New Mexico or somewhere, and he went screaming through town, yelling, "They're going to kill me! They're going to kill me!" Now this book is out, screaming they're going to kill him. Well, what happened was he got picked up and hauled into an emergency room at a hospital, and well, he ended up dead. How did he end up dead? Well, who knows, right? Um, he went into a hospital because he thought somebody was going to kill him over his participation in that whole case. They give him something to calm him down, and the next morning he's dead. So how'd that happen? Well, who else was in the hospital room? So he showed up at an emergency room in Santa Fe, New Mexico, reportedly terrified and paranoid. And he said, they're going to kill me for talking. They're going to kill me because of the book. Hospital staff sedated him to calm his agitation. He was found dead the next morning, listed as a natural death, probably due to cerebral aneurysm or similar events. However, reports suggest that no autopsy was performed or the results were not made public. Friends, family, and researchers have expressed suspicion, believing foul play may have been involved. And yes, I believe it was definitely false. He was killed in that hospital. I mean, I don't see other ways around it. So I'm going to tell you this story now because a Rothschild journal published in 1889 included a document dated January the 13th, 1489 for the following. The advice of the grand satraps and rabbis is as follows. Make your sons merchants, that little by little they may despoil the Christians of their possessions. Make your sons doctors and apothecarists, so they may take away Christian lives. Make your sons canons and clerics, in order that they may destroy their churches. Arrange that your sons become advocates and lawyers, and see that they mix themselves in the affairs of the estate, in order that by putting Christians under their yoke, you may dominate the world. And that came from I found another one of those creepy letters that's out there. And this letter was the first place I could track it was around, this letter first appeared around 2000. And it is called Letter from Your Globalist Friend. And I believe this letter to be true, or I wouldn't be bothering reading it, because you will notice there's a certain kind of seethiness to this reading. But let me just read it as it states. Dear citizen of the world, I believe the time has come to reveal to you some of the perplexities you have faced in recent decades. It is well for you to understand some of these things so that you might know how to behave in the new order now taking shape on the earth. We want you to be able to become fully involved and integrated into our new society. After all, this is for your best interest, if you will do. First of all, it is well that you understand some of our purposes so that you may more fully cooperate. I cannot tell you the hard times you will face if you resist us. We have ways of dealing with resistors. I am only telling you this now, since it is much too late to turn things around. The days of putting a stop to us having long since passed. We have full control of the earth and its finance, along with the major media propaganda, and there is simply no way any nation or power can defeat us. We have eyes at every level of government in every nation of the world. We know what is being planned, for our ears and eyes are ever present. State secrets are fully known to us. China recently accused the media in the U.S. of lying about Kosovo. Oh, you silly people. Of course we lie. In this way, we can keep the people unbalanced and always facing controversy, which is very helpful to us. Have you not seen the talk show spectacle? Some of you believe we are liberals and the good people are the conservatives. In reality, both serve our purposes. Each camp merely serves with a stamp of our approval, but they are not allowed to present the real issues. By creating controversy on all levels, no one knows what to do. So in all of this confusion, we go ahead and accomplish what we want with no hindrance. Consider the President of the United States. Even though he regularly breaks every known check on his power, no one can stop him. He goes ahead and does whatever we want him to do anyway. The Congress has no power to stop him. He does what we want, since he knows if he does not, because of his rather dark character, we can have him removed in a moment's time. It is not a matter of brilliant strategy on our part. You cannot take us to court because you can't see us, and the courts are our servants as well. We run everything, yet you do not know who to attack. I must say, this hidden hand is wonderfully devised and without any known historical precedent on this scale. We rule the world, and the world cannot even find out who is ruling them. This is truly a wonderful thing. In our media, we present before you exactly what we want you to do. Then, as if in a flash, our little servants obey. We can send American or European troops to wherever we like, whenever we like, or for whatever purpose we like, and you can dutifully go about our business. How much more evidence do you need? We can make you desire to leave your homes and family and go to war merely at our command. We only need to present some nonsense to you for the president's desk or on the evening news, and we can get you all fired up to do whatever we like. You can do nothing but what we put before you. Would any of you seek to resist us, we have ways of making you look ridiculous, as we have done with your militia movement. We have delighted to use this movement to show the world how impotent any resistance is. They look so silly, marching around with their guns as if they were some marching for our military. Look at what we did near Waco. Did the Davidians' little store of weapons help them? We have generously taxed you and used that money to make such sophisticated weapons you can in no way compete. Your own money has served to forge the chains we bind you with, since we are in control of all money. Some of you think you may escape by buying some land in the country or growing a garden. Let me remind you that you still pay us ground rent. Oh, you may call it property taxes, but it still goes to us. You see, we need money no matter what you do. If you fail to pay your ground rent to us, we will take your land and sell it to someone else who will pay us. Do you think we cannot do this? And with your ground rent, we pay for the indoctrination of your children in the public schools we set up. We want them to grow up well trained into the system of our thinking. Your children will learn what we want them to learn when we want them to learn it, and you pay for it through your ground rent. Those funds are also used for other projects we have in mind, and our contractors are paid handsomely for their work. You may doubt that we own your children or have such control, but you will find that we do. We can declare that you abuse your children when you spank them or have them confiscated. If they do not show up for school indoctrination, we can accuse you of neglect, thereby giving them to us. Your children are not yours, they're ours. You must inoculate them. You must bring them to our hospitals. If we decree or we'll take them from you. You know this and we know this. Through our electronic commerce, we are able to see where you are, what you are buying, and how much you have to buy things with. Where do you suppose we come up with our monthly financial statistics? Through the internet and other sources, we can even know how you think and what you say. It's not especially important to us what you believe as long as you do what we say. Your beliefs are nonsense anyways. If you think you have a following and we perceive that you might be somewhat dangerous to our agenda, we have ways to deal with you. We have a Pandora's box of mischief with which to snare you. We can have you in court for so long you'll never get out. We can easily drain away all of your assets over one pretext or another. We have an inexhaustible fund from which to draw to pay our lawyers. These lawyers are paid by you in the form of taxes. You do not have this vast supply of wealth. We know how to divide and conquer. Have we not brought down rulers of countries through our devices? Do you think your tiny self-will will be any match for us? And let us consider your religious and the moral majority. The moral majority is neither moral nor in the majority. We have delighted to use this wet noodle of a movement to make ridiculous the Christian faith. The silly men who run that organization always end up with egg on their faces. We have always put them in defense of themselves, as we have so successfully done with the NRA. We can make it seem by our media propaganda that the National Rifle Association, or NRA, is actually the new radical attackers. Have we not turned the American conservative movement on its ear? If it serves our purposes, we can use the conservatives to turn the liberals on their ear. It makes no difference to us, but it serves to make you believe there are two sides struggling for their particular position. This makes things seem fair and free since everyone has a voice. Actually, though, there is only one side now with all kinds of masks on, but you are unable to penetrate our purposes. You see, we can do whatever we like, and you can do nothing about it. Does it not seem reasonable that you simply obey and serve us? Otherwise, you get eaten up in the resistance you suppose will liberate you. You cannot be liberated. Imagine how you can. We supply your fuel for your cars. We can turn it off whenever we like, claiming there's some sort of fuel shortage. What if your car breaks down? You cannot get parts for it without us. We supply all the money you use. At any whim of our desire, we can stop the money supply or cause a complete crash altogether. We can then order the president to declare all money worthless and that we still have new money. All of your stashes of cash will go up in smoke in a moment's time. Don't you need food? If necessary, we can cause a trucker strike, which would stop deliveries of food to your local store. We can starve you whenever we like. You only have food because we have provided it from you from our table. Signed, your globalist friend. Well, they like to state that everything is over, we got it done, we got you in the corner. That is the words of a psychopath. It is not a done deal. They've tried to pull this trigger many times in the past. So let me take a break and I'll come back with a really good article about it. It's called Murder by Morphine.
Okay, this article is called Murder by Morphine. I have a very critical view of the medical industry. For the amount of money spent, I don't see where people get much value for the expense. There's too much emphasis on treating the symptoms instead of working on a cure. Of course, if you're a cynic like me, you'll think there's no money in a cure. Cures are bad for repeat business. Last year, I met a man who had COPD. We would walk we would walk the dogs together. One day he called and asked me if I could help him with a few things because he couldn't drive any longer. In following his medical requirements, I can safely say that I've never seen such a shit show. If I acted like these doctors when I was in business, I would go broke. Yet MDs have the highest suicide rate of any profession. Maybe their consciousness can't take the evil of what they're doing. The main problem my friend Dan had was that he couldn't raise his head. His head tilted at about 30 degrees, and that's why he couldn't drive. He also had COPD, and his breathing was very difficult at various times. When he went into the pulmonary doctor, the MD was very short with him and gave him few answers to his questions. The main purpose of his visit was for him to set up with oxygen, which this doctor didn't give a prescription. As the doctor was ending the session or visit, Dan asked for the prescription. The doctor offhandedly wrote the prescription while walking backward with his computer cart going out the door. I couldn't believe it. This guy was a real shit stick. In addition, Dan never received the oxygen equipment he requested in time as his condition worsened. A few months earlier, I had been in the ER myself with pulmonary edema, and I had the same type of difficulty breathing. I got out in 2 days and even walked home. While I was helping Dan, I had purchased an oxygen saturation gauge. I had Dan use it, and he showed 76 to 83 oxygen level, and the least it should be is 95. I suggested that he should go to the hospital. I'm still kicking my own ass for giving this suggestion. He goes into hospital, number one, and stays for about 5 days. He is then sent to rehab death center. I'm being sarcastic, where they started him on morphine. I had a shit fit. He went downhill very rapidly and was back into hospital number two. He stays in hospital number two, and they continue to give him morphine. He was not in any pain other than the difficulty of breathing. While this condition is very uncomfortable, there is no pain associated with it that would warrant the use of morphine. While under the influence of morphine, he became complacent and he didn't seem to care about what was happening to him. He was then transferred to the rehab hospital again, and they continued the morphine nonsense until he died. On his second visit, I was followed around the hospital by a member of the staff because I made the suggestion that they give Dan vitamin C injections rather than the morphine. Dan hadn't eaten much in 4 weeks, and when he did eat, it wasn't very much. Patients like these need to be fed nutrients and not drugs like morphine. Since I wasn't a family member, I didn't have the standing to force the issue. It seems to me that the injection of vitamins and other helpful nutrients would be a lot better than shooting him up with more morphine. While this medical process is going on, I noticed how nice and polite the healthcare workers were, but they were not interested in vitamin C injections. The reason I suggested them is because of my studies on the subject and also a 60-minute story from Australia. The man in the story had swine flu and was almost taken off life support, but his family put pressure on the doctors and they gave him vitamin C. He made a full recovery and he can still fly his own airplane. I gave these healthcare workers a link to the article, but none seemed interested. When I suggested vitamin C injections to one of the doctors for Dan, he said no. The tone of his voice was pure evil. I was really pissed, but I held my temper. Dan's family wasn't on the same page as me, so I basically had to watch him slowly die. In my view, without proper nutrition, no patient is going to live for too long. Rather than giving Dan what he needed, they gave him morphine instead and greased the skids for him to slide to his death, all while smiling and looking like they care. I became traumatized by the stupidity and the evil of it all, and I couldn't do anything about it. However, it began to dawn on me that my mother died at the same hospital. She had full blown lung cancer, and I didn't know much about alternative cares at that time. The last time I saw her, she said to me, "You're trying to kill me." I got upset that my own mother would say or think such a thing. But now, over 20 years later, I'm thinking the same thing was happening to her. Now I feel bad that I didn't recognize the problem. Rather than giving cancer patients the nutrients they need to recover, the medical staff simply injects the patient with morphine and dispatches them into eternity. In another instance, I told a friend about my experience with Dan, and she proceeded to tell me a story which was similar. Again, it was the injection of morphine into the patient that kept them quiet and made them die. This is not health care, it's death care. While there may be a place for morphine in certain instances, what I have seen is truly pathetic. Here is a quote from Dr. Reich Hammond, MD. The worst thing about the present medicine is that most patients with cancer, regardless of the pain, even in mild cases, are treated with morphine or morphine like drugs. At the critical part of the healing phase, one morphine injection can already be fatal. It also changes the brain waves in a terrible way and totally demoralizes the patient. The intestines get paralyzed and can no longer digest any food. The patient becomes lethargic and doesn't realize that in reality he is being killed just when he was in the healing phase, on his way to health in a few weeks. If one were to tell a prisoner in jail that he will be executed in 2 weeks, there would be an outcry of sympathy, even for the worst criminal. If you tell a patient that the execution starts in the form of a morphine injection and will end in 14 days, he would rather stand the pain than be killed by the morphine. If the patient looks back at the relatively short time in pain, he is thankful for the new medicine and the trust he had in his doctor. In Dan's case, he couldn't digest his food properly and had to physically remove the waste. This happened This happened a few days before he went into the hospital. Dan had started to feel better in the ER and was then moved to a rehab facility. And it was at the rehab facility that he became progressively worse and passed away after the injections. Dan didn't seem to care about what happened to him as he was demoralized by the morphine. I was thinking that I couldn't interfere with his free will to choose what was best for him. Did I witness a murder? If I look back on the facts, I'd have to say that I did. I gave the medical staff the evidence that I had on the value of vitamin C and the link, which is at the bottom of this article. I'm still upset about what I saw, and I can hardly believe it myself. I'm acquainted with conspiracies, but this one took me by surprise. Is medical care a carefully planned eugenics program? My view, based on the facts presented, that it is designed to cull the population, especially those who are on Social Security and Medicare. But in the meantime, the medical industry is making a ton of money providing health care, which isn't very healthy. I was visiting some friends, and one of them was a doctor. I said something about going to the hospital, and she said, "Don't go to the hospital. They will kill you." I guess my mom was right. She took good care of me, and I feel like I failed her when she needed it the most. Even though I was ignorant of what was going on at the time, it doesn't make me feel any better. Bad decisions always get bad results. I believe that people should do their own research and then make more intelligent choices in regards to their health. Don't expect a doctor to know everything. If his treatment fails, you die, not him. And here are some comments. Paulette said, similar to what happened to my dear husband, my friend's husband, and another friend's mother. We are broken-hearted and blame ourselves. It's them. It's the evil medical profession now. Comment from Anonymous. I'm glad you're posting again. Paulette doesn't understand the world very well. The medical profession is one of the first professions where the devil set up shop. I haven't been to a doctor in years. I died naturally. Another person named Josephine. I also witnessed murder in front of my very own eyes and was powerless to stop it. I kept running in my head everything that occurred before the hospital finally killed my best friend. It was horrible. Less than a few months later, it happened to my dad. With him, they gave him a pill that was supposedly to help him breathe better. He died instead. I am mourning two losses, all due to hospitals that are into killing. Another comment from somebody named Barney. My girlfriend was murdered by those vultures. She was perfectly healthy and thought her doctor was her friend until that first injection. I'm guessing it was Naglace or Alexon, both of which cause diabetes. Having made her diabetic, they denied her the treatment she needed to keep her alive. I saw what was happening, but was disqualified from complaining because only the victim's immediate next of kin are allowed to make a complaint or even to ask for an investigation after such an obvious medical murder. I've also got my own morphine related horror stories, but I eventually managed to get off the poison and decided I'd rather endure the pain and have my mind back. And another one from a person named Anonymous. You need to get a medical power of attorney. And I have one down below for you to take a look at. I only linked there's a bunch of them online. Anybody with half a brain can find a medical form for identity. So it is a document signed by the patient before they're admitted that will make you their spokesperson and decision maker instead of family. A lot of older people have no close family, or at least no close family available, and the hospital uses that to do as they wish. So I've got the form down below, and I'll read one more. When hospitals, which have incidentally turned into law offices, do not have remedies or medications to heal patients, they resort to killing. Thus, even if you have a power of attorney, as I did, they end up doing what they want and lie about it in their medical records. My friend had a do not resuscitate order, or DNR level 3, for pulmonary arrest. And without my knowledge, she turned it into a level 1, giving the hospital, and without my knowledge, she turned into the hospital the right to kill my friend. In the medical report, the doctor claimed I and my sister gave her the right to do so, which was a lie. I am a Catholic who believes in pro-life and am against euthanasia. So yeah, um, another morphine story, was told by hospice that whatever and however much morphine my dad asked for, I could give it to him because technically he would not be ODing. My dad did not want morphine. Home hospice includes it in your care kit. While I was at my hotel resting for a bit, another relative gave my dad the morphine, kept dripping it in his mouth. He later died. Granted, he was on the verge of death, but he was a Christian and wanted as sound a mind as possible and stated, "Do not give me morphine." I honored my father. The others did not. I later learned the morphine can suppress breathing to the point of death, a detail I cannot deal with and trust absolutely no one on this earth. My dad just died 15 days ago. The second round of toxic chemo poison is what killed him. He had diarrhea and couldn't stop going. They tested him for C. difficile and he was negative. I asked the poison doctor how long the chemo stays in the system. He didn't even answer me. Later found out it can stay in the body for 2 months. Dr. Death suggested hospice. Dad had been on morphine and other painkillers due to the pain and been on them while he built up tolerance, so to speak. Yeah, there's a lot of stories. I'm going to be going over this last part here. I've got to close off this file. I ran into Israel Zeus. I was glad to run into him. The guy's a great researcher, and he is where I got a lot of the data on these people from before. And he came up with one, and there was a mini version of what he did, and he came up with he did one that was kind of like a mini Donald Trump one. So I posted that all below because you know that Donald Trump kept a copy of My New Order on his bedside, according to his wife, and that was a book, a collection of Hitler's speeches. People are really into that Hitler stuff, all for a very good reason, right? It's because that's who they are. Um, Let me see here. Why can't I find this? Okay. Okay. Fred Trump was his father. I'll be having more about Fred Trump later. Fred Trump was a very, very violent and vicious man, very into murdering and raping young boys, but not for today. So one of Fred Trump's tenants was folk singer Woody Guthrie, who mortalized him in a song. I suppose old man Trump knows just how much racial hate he stirred up in the blood spot of hearts. Yeah. And Trump has been a friend of the Clintons for a long time. It goes through all the people that he hired, the Goldman Sachs people that he hired for his first term, and all of his friends with, they're all friends. All of them are friends. Even that Steve Bannon, everybody acts like he's some outsider. No, he's not. He was like best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. I would advise you to stop repeating mindless bits of information that don't make any sense, or because to say that Steve Bannon is a good guy in this is kind of a mistake if you ask me. So anyway, he also has information about they're all trying to blame the Israel now for Epstein. Um, they're all trying to say that Trump will kowtow because probably the people in Israel will get to him. Come on. All those people on social media, you are the commodity, right? None of those people, or very few of them, would be showing up if your value wasn't there. If they weren't gaining something from lying to you with their ad revenue and stuff, these people would not be there talking to any of you. They're so self-serving. Anyway, so there's more information about. I think that Ivanka is maybe. I mean, they say that he's one of Ivanka is his handler. Could be, could be. And it has all this stuff about his dirty business with the Saudis, that whole mafia business, about him and Mar-a-Lago. Alex Acosta. I started covering this case before people did, and Alex Acosta is a key figure. He was the one who gave him the first deal, Dershowitz. Um, and also, before you go around repeating things, Virginia Giuffre was a major liar, okay? Liar, liar, pants on fire. They couldn't use Virginia Giuffre in the case against, what's her face? Ghislaine Maxwell because of all of her lying and stuff. She is a major liar. I doubt that she committed suicide. Nothing about that adds up. She was there to lie and spin about that case all along the way. So, and people always use her as well. She killed herself, so she had to have known the truth. Now, two things can be true at the same time. She's probably not dead, number one. And number two, just because somebody's dead doesn't mean something else happened, right? So just because they claim she committed suicide, but they always, oh, somebody killed her. Listen, they're killing me right now in my home, and I don't take this lightly. And I get a little bit tired of people throwing this stuff around. I mean, some of these people don't do themselves any favors. So anyway, they also have information about his connections with the people in Spain. I read the other day that Spain is getting overrun with those Morocco Moroccans from Netherlands are all running all over Spain now. So anyway, um, they all have connections to all of this stuff. And Donald Trump and his business associate, who was previously charged with running a prostitution ring of young Eastern girls, yeah, these people, they all connect. So just to pull one of them out of there, like people are now saying that guy in New York, that Zoran guy, or is it some great socialist? Oh, he's just like us. We got to get this guy elected into office. Oh, come on. People need to learn how to read and look for themselves. That guy came from a very wealthy family. He is not one of us. He just isn't a billionaire class, but he's a millionaire class, right? So you keep saying these millionaires and billionaires are good. Well, that really is not going to get you anywhere fast because none of them are any good. I'm pretty sure you have to do a lot of really sleazy stuff. Anyway, so back to this list. So anyway, so Ivana Trump is there with this guy from Prince Prince Marconi from Colonna in Italy. There's pictures of him next to those mobsters. I didn't know this. Trump's friend Robert Labuti was an associate of the Gambino crime family. Labuti was a casino gambler who'd been banned from casinos with his mafia ties. So he has a lot of another interesting one that I didn't know about. Kellyanne Conway. Remember, she was so big into Trump the first time around. Well, her grandfather, Jimmy the Brute Donatelli, was an Italian mobster. And Trump is also connected with this Felix Sater, who's a Russian mafia guy. So, yeah, he did a really good job on this mini version of the mafia people and how they all connect. And Peter Thiel, of course, is in here. These people are very strange people. I think that putting their people in front of us with microphones was kind of a mistake because I don't know, any thinking person at this point could see that their people all look like they have a little bit something ticky wrong in the head, don't they? I mean, that Peter Thiel, that guy sounds like a monster. So, anyways, be safe out there. I got to close this off for now. So, I think the bottom line is this: the Catholic Church is obviously running the whole Satan deal, right? And this is to run us into Satan. And I find it interesting how they designed all these flags. The U.S. has certainly a very satanic flag if you look at it, red and blue, right? Red and blue, and those stars. And those stars, of course, are what they call their symbolism. So, yeah, everything about this is coded. Now, do I believe this went back thousands of years ago? No, not for a minute. I don't believe these people could have held themselves together for longer than the last couple hundred years. Just look at them right now. They're simply falling to pieces. So I doubt that. I doubt this happened thousands of years ago, but I'm just presenting to you what I know so far. So you're going to have to think for yourself. To me, it looks like the whole plot got cooking around the time of those Catholics and all that stuff. And there's a reason why they put on those purple robes, right? To show us who they are, right? They are, in fact, satanic. No doubt about it in my mind. So be safe out there. Goodbye for now.